Welcome to today's webinar on APA formatting tips. Our presenter this evening is Dr. Novak. Just a little bit about Dr. Novak. She's been with Aspen University in the nursing program since 2017. Her PhD is in public health, where she has an interest in community health and education. She's got a background in emergency nursing as well as adult continuing professional development. And she is kind of known among the Aspen faculty as the APA expert and the go-to person when you've got APA questions. So, Dr. Novak, thank you for agreeing to share your wisdom with us tonight, and I'll turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you for the welcome, Dr. Frederick, and welcome to everybody who is able to tune in tonight. And for those who are watching the taped version, hopefully the noise level in the background will stay down. You're not going to learn everything you need to know about APA in 30 minutes. The only reason I am probably as comfortable with APA as I am is because I was forced to learn it so that I could teach it. I hated APA when I went through it as a student. It didn't make sense to me, and I had a hard time with it as well. But what we're going to try to cover today is some of the key things with formatting references and citations of the most common types of evidence-based sources you're going to be using for your papers and for writing up your projects or dissertations. So if you have to memorize anything in APA, memorizing how to do these formulas is going to set you up for success. Everything else you can pretty much look up either online or in the APA manual if you have some different types of references. So today we're going to cover basically how to do a basic book reference, a journal reference, and a website reference. Once you can get down that formula, it's not as complicated. Now, I do want to give a shout out for a couple of things. I know a lot of students are using Perla, which is a software that helps you with formatting your APA. And to the extent of using it, it is pretty good software, but it does have some flaws in it. And we actually found a couple yesterday when I was going through a student's paper, and she emailed me and she said, "Oh, Perla didn't pick up on that as being an error." And what Perla missed was in the journal reference, it actually spelled out the word volume where you're not supposed to put the actual word, you just put the number. And she said Perla did that. And Perla also had her spacing off. So what she's going to have to do now when she uses Perla is after she writes her paper, she'll have to go back and manually adjust it to bring it into the correct format. So Perla is good, but it's got some flaws. So again, this is why you need to know APA to a certain extent. The other concern, just as you know, if some of you may be using the website or the software Grammarly, which helps with stringing sentences together, and that's a nice resource as well. But again, it's only as good as the user. So what can happen with Grammarly is it can take a sentence and rewrite it in what you might think is proper sentence structure. But in reality, what Grammarly ends up doing just through the software is it distorts the message. So again, if you're using Grammarly, great, but that doesn't mean you don't have to proofread. You do have to go back and proofread to make sure that the sentences make sense and the grammar is still correct. So those are just two little caveats in terms of writing your papers. So here are your basic resources. Besides your APA Manual 7th edition, you can get it in two formats. One is a paperback book or a spiral book. The prices vary depending on where you buy it from. You can buy it on a lot of the different internet websites, as well as you can buy it directly from the APA website. They also came out with a pocket guide, which is a spiral bound, kind of condensed version of the manual. Neither book is what I would say user-friendly until you really start getting used to looking through the book. It's very confusing. But the more you use the book, the easier it's going to be to find your answers to your questions. However, if you can't find the answer to your question and you can't get in touch with your instructor to get the answer, you can always email the people on the APA website. They have a Q&A place where you can type in your question, and they're pretty good about getting back to you within a couple of hours with the correct answer. So here on this screenshot is the website for APA, and what they have on this website now are some wonderful instructional aids. They have downloads for handouts. They have videos you can watch. They have a video for step-by-step formatting of a paper and how to create a template for all your future papers. They have a lot of great information that is coming from the horse's mouth, so to speak, as opposed to going to other sites which may not be as credible. So be careful about using some other sites which may not have all the correct information. Stick with APA. APA also has their own Facebook page, and they post information on that as well. You can join or follow them. And again, on their Facebook page, you can PM them or personal message them with questions. And they say on that site it will take up to 48 hours to respond, but they do respond. The other resource that I was surprised to find out a lot of students weren't aware of is in the paperback version of the APA manual. On the inside cover and the front and the back, you have a quick look. You have quick reference and citation examples. So you don't have to go trying to find it in the book itself unless you have a specific concern. But on the back page insert, you can see a quick example of how to format a website, how to do a book, how to do a chapter within a book. So you don't have to try to figure out what page it's on in the manual. So I encourage you to use that as a resource when you're looking for how to do your citations and your references. So let's start with citations. Basically, all citations are going to be the same. You're always going to have to put who the author is and the year it was published. If you have two authors, you have to list both of them. So as you can see here on the left, onto my left of this table, you'd have both authors' last names, and then you'd put a comma and the year. In the event that you have more than two authors, APA says you can now go to having the et al., which means there's more than two in people who wrote whatever it is you're citing. And so this cuts down on the amount of typing you have to do, but you need to then put et al. And then a comma and the year. As you can see inside where the parentheses are, there's a comma after the et al. And the year. What I see a lot of students making mistakes with the et al. Is they forget the period after that al. They'll put the comma, but they forget the period. So you want to make sure you're having that attention to detail. If you are quoting a source, so you're saying, Fred Flintstone said, "I like Dino the dinosaur," and that's a direct quote, then you need to identify the author, the year it was said, and where you got it from the source. So if it's from a book, it's pretty easy. It's the page number. But if you get it off the internet, you're going to have to identify possibly either the paragraph or the line number. In some cases, you can also identify it by the section that it's in. In your APA manual, it gives you other ways to identify where you found that quote. And the reason you want to give credit for the location is just in case the reader wants to go look up that quote, they know exactly where in the source to find. This shows you how to do a citation in the body of the sentence versus when you're doing a citation at the end of the sentence where you're going to put everything inside a parentheses. So at the very bottom of this slide, it gives an example of when to use or how the citation would look in the body of the sentence where it says Cagney and Lacey, parentheses, the year it was published, and then you continue saying discussed, blah, blah, blah. Notice that in writing a citation, when it's part of a sentence, you always use the word and if you have more than just one author. If it was where you had 3 or 4 authors and you're putting it in the body of the sentence, it could be Cagney et al. And then 2021. But the and is for use inside the sentence. However, when the citation is at the end of the sentence, we always use the ampersand. The example is from Peter Parker in Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. And so we have Parker, comma, 2019 at the end of the sentence. Again, if you're using the et al, it's got the et al with the period, comma, 2012. And then the period goes at the end of the sentence after the citation. So some people will put a period before the citation, and that is incorrect. The period has to go after the citation. Other citations you may run into is when you have a website or you have a group author. And in this case, your citation would be the name of the author, for example, and then the year. Now, a lot of times people are using websites that the organization has an abbreviation like the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention or the National Institute of Health or many of the others that are abbreviated. So if you're going to use something like that that's an organization that has an abbreviation, what you would do is spell out the name of the organization and then using brackets put the abbreviation, comma, and the year. After you've done this for the first time, we identified what the name of the group is through this abbreviation. Then the next time you cite, you can just go right to using the abbreviation. And that saves again on typing. So this is an example of if we were using the Institute of Medicine, we would spell it out and then put the abbreviation of IOM in brackets and then the comma and the year. And then after showing the name of the abbreviation, I would then be able to use IOM in my citation, as well as using IOM in my sentence. So again, it cuts down on some of the keystrokes you need to worry about using. Word about unknown authors of work. Some people will jump right to thinking that they can put anonymous as the name of the author if there is no author listed. But APA says that you don't use the word anonymous unless it's actually in the publication. So if you don't know who wrote the work, then you want to include the title of the work and the year of the publication. If the title is in italics in the references, then it should be italicized in the citation. So this means normally if a book title, you normally would have italicized in a reference. So that means when you take that to use it, if there's no known author, you would have the italicized title of the book as your citation. Otherwise, use regular font. So a journal article, the title of a journal article is typically written in regular font in a reference, so it will be written in regular font in the citation. Interestingly enough, in the citation, the name of the article is in title case where it's not in a reference, and we'll get to that in a minute. If you have a long name of the article or the book, you can actually shorten the title for the citation. So that way, again, you're cutting down on your keystrokes, but then the reader can look back to the references to see what the full name of the reference is. Again, groups and organizations are commonly used for the author. We see that with things like the National Institute of Medicine. We see that with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And by the way, if you are going to be using something like the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, make sure you write out the entire name of the organization. I've seen some students just put Centers for Disease Control, and that's not the correct name of the organization. So again, be careful that you're attentive to detail. That's really important for scholarly writing as well. So that's pretty much it for citing. And again, if you go back to the front inside cover of your APA manual, there's not a lot of different ways to cite things because it's always going to be the author and the year. And then if you're quoting, it'll include the location of the quote. So that I think is pretty easy for most people. Book references, when you start looking at those, the formula is it's always the last name of the author, comma, first initial, and there's a period between each of the initials. And APA says that you put a space between the initials. The title of the book is always written in sentence case and italics. Now, a lot of textbooks may have a colon in their title. So whenever you see a colon in the title of a book or a journal, the first word after the colon is always capitalized. Then you're going to put the name of the publisher. And if the book has a DOI, APA says to put the DOI. So if there's one listed, and more books now are being published with DOIs. One thing about a DOI is after you put the DOI, you never put a period after it. And the reason you don't put a period after the DOI is because if I was reading your paper and I wanted to go look at that article and I clicked on it and pasted it into my browser, it would give me an error message because it's reading that period and that messes up the whole link. So you don't want a period after the DOI, and you also don't want a period after any type of a URL in a reference. So here's the example of the name of the author, comma, the initials that are capitalized with a period and a space between the initials, the year it was published, the name of the book, and as you can see, it's the name of the book is in italics. There is a colon in the name of the book, and so the word right after the colon gets put into title case. For those of you who are not familiar with sentence case versus title case is where you have a capital letter of each word. Any word that APA says any word that has 4 or more letters in it, when you're looking at what goes into becoming title case, it's a word that has 4 or more letters. So in this case, the G is capitalized because we have the start of the sentence or the start of the book. So that's title case for global. The word health would be considered sentence case because it's a lowercase h if we say sentence case. But the issues word is also in title case because it comes right after the colon. Notice also that after the name of the book, there's no period because there's an addition. So you put the addition information in and then a period after the whole name of the book and then the name of the publisher. Now, some people will put Springer Publishing Company. That's okay. Some people will put, INC for Inc. for the name of the publishing company after the name. APA says that you don't have to write out publishing company, for example, because the collective we all know that that is the name of the publisher. The big difference with the books for those of you who are doing APA 6th edition versus 7th, is in the old edition, we used to have to put the location of publication. When 7th edition came out, they got rid of that, so it's a little bit easier, and all we have to put now is the actual name of the publisher. Now, a lot of the books that you might be using for Aspen or whatever school you're going to, you might be using a virtual book or one that you have bought that's an online version. So if you're referencing your ebook or electronic book, it's the same format, just after the name of the publisher, you're going to put the URL of the publisher that takes you to the online site of the book. If you are using a chapter in a book that you are referencing, the format for that is located again, a quick look on the inside cover of your APA manual, or you can follow this link, which will take you directly to how to format a chapter in the edited book. And basically, it's the same format initially, with the author of the chapter going first. And then after you put the name of the chapter, which would be in regular font, you would then identify the name of the editor of the book, and then the name of the book and the rest of the information, what pages the chapter was from, and if there was an edition that goes in there as well. So it's a little more complicated to do that. Some people choose to get very specific about making sure they're giving credit to a specific chapter author. I'm not sure how much of a difference that will make in terms of your APA formatting. That would be something to talk to your individual instructors about, because some people have their own ideas about, in terms of referencing, how specific they want it to get in terms of identifying a chapter editor versus just the name of the book and the author information. It is helpful, though, if you've quoted directly from the chapter, that you would identify the chapter author in your reference. Websites seem to be very confusing for a lot of people to reference to figure out how to do it. And on pages 351 to 352 in your APA manual, there's very specific types of websites that are identified, and it gives you examples of how to cite a website as well as how to format the reference. But the basic recipe for formatting a website reference is you would have the author information and then the year, the name of the web article, which you note is in italics and sentence case. So sentence case means, again, that is if you were writing a sentence, you capitalize the first word of the sentence, and any proper nouns would be capitalized. Like if it was driving through Africa as a title, the D for driving would be capitalized because it's starting the sentence, and Africa would have a capital A because it's a proper noun. After the name of the web article, then you put the name of the website and then the URL or the web link to the article. In terms of putting the link to the article, you want to make sure it is the direct link. Don't put just the home page, like cdc.gov. That's not taking me to the article. I want to be able, or you want the reader to be able to go right to that actual web page that you got the information from. So you want to give the reader as much information as possible in these references. If there's more than just a year of publication on that website, in terms of when it was specifically written, put the year, the date, even if the month is there as well. A lot of websites have group authors, like the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. So in this case, you would follow the formula for a group author, and there's always a period after the group author. I've seen some people make some errors where they'll put a comma or they will forget to put the period. So it's always a group author and a period before you put the year of publication. Again, the name of the website, article, and the URL. Now, if the group author also happens to be the name of the website, you don't have to repeat it. So, for example, if the group author here is the Centers for Disease Control, like in this picture, Disease Control and Prevention, we would list the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention as the group author. You don't put the abbreviation. You want to make sure you've spelled it out. You can put CDC in parentheses after you've spelled out the name, but you definitely have to put the name spelled out because we don't want to assume that everybody knows what the abbreviation stands for. And then it would be the name of the article. And because it's the group author is also the name of the website, we don't have to repeat that. However, if you have the group author is the National Institute of Health, but they posted something on the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, then you would have to put the group author as the National Institute of Health, the year, the name of the web article, the name of the website, which would be Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. That is written in regular font, and then the direct URL. In terms of dates, if there is not a date identified on that web article where you would put the year of publication, you'd put the N period, D period, which stands for no date. Now, some websites are tricky and you have to play detective to try to find who the author is and who and when it was written. So always scroll down to the bottom of the article to see if there's an author's name there and a date that it was published. Do not use the copyright date at the very, very bottom of the page because the copyright date is the date that the actual website was copyrighted, not the date the article was written. When you're using websites, make sure that they're evidence-based. The safest ones to use are those that end in a .gov, a .edu, or a .org. Stay away from sources that are not evidence-based, such as Wikipedia, Scribd, SlideShare. Blogs are typically not evidence-based. Newspapers, it depends on what the article is about. Sometimes a newspaper article can be used because it might be talking about a recent event that helps you make a point about what you're talking about in your paper. So those are kind of iffy. But as you go to a website and you're doing all the research that you're doing, ask yourself when you're looking at the website, is this selling a product or a service? Are there authors listed? Is there a date of publication and how current is the information? Are there references on the site? Did the author who wrote the article put references? That gives you a little bit more to identify if it's a legitimate site or not. For example, in one class I teach, we have a paper that people write about legalizing marijuana for medical use. And a lot of the students went to these marijuana sites that sell products. And, they sell the paraphernalia, they sell the marijuana, gummies, whatever it is. And so the information they have on it is very pro use of the marijuana for medical purposes. And it's then biased because it's not peer reviewed and it's not a fair look at the pros and cons, benefits, risks, etc., of using the particular type of form of marijuana for medical use. So if there's pop-ups, are there ads on the website? It's probably not a website you want to use for scholarly writing. The other issue that comes up when you're looking at a website reference is when to use the phrase retrieve from. And in this case, the APA manual is very specific about when you want to use it. So here's an example of a website that I found from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and it was about a travel update to go, I don't know to what country, I forget what it was. But as you can see, it says here it was updated on May 3rd, 2022. So in this case, whenever I see the word updated, I'm going to make sure that I put a retrieve date, because that's telling the reader that the information I got on May 22nd was May 26th here in my example was current based on what was here. If I, the reader, went back to look at this website in September of 2022, information may have changed and I may have a last update with a more current date on it. And so it tells the reader that as of May 26th, that was what was on the page versus what's currently there. And how often that changes, you just never know. I did have one paper where a student actually did a retrieve from date. And then when I pulled it up to look at it, the the date of the last update had changed by 1 day. So whatever they were citing from it may or may not have been on that page with the new update, if that makes sense. So in this case, because there is an updated date, I'm going to put retrieve from with the date that I got it from, and then the exact website it came from. There are some other exceptions for when you would use retrieve from in a reference, and that is when the work is from a website that is generally updated on a regular basis and is not archived, meaning it's not been published. It's like a journal article. In most cases, a journal article is published, so you don't need a retrieve from date. There is a book that's published on the internet called Stat Pearls, and that's updated on a regular basis, and it will say last update and give a date. So if you ever use Stat Pearls, you want to make sure you are using the retrieve from in that phrase for a reference for Stat Pearls. Up to date is an example of a reference work that is updated and not archived. So you would put retrieve from. The Cochrane database is another one that you would definitely want to use retrieved from as part of your reference. Formatting a journal article is fairly straightforward. Again, it's always the author information goes first. Notice when you have two authors, there's always a comma before the ampersand, and that's going to be true if you have multiple authors. Before the ampersand and the last author's information, there's always a comma after that last initial. Title of the article is written in sentence case and regular font. And again, if there's a colon in the name of the title, the first word after the colon is capitalized. Also capitalize any proper nouns. The name of the journal and the volume number is always in italics. The name of the journal is written in title case. So notice anything that has 4 or more letters in the name of the journal would be in title case. The volume number, you just put the number, do not write the word volume, just put the number there in italics. And then if there's an issue number, that goes inside parentheses and if you notice here in this example, there's no space between the volume number and the issue number. They're right on top of each other. Follow that with a comma, then put the page numbers. And you don't have to write page or put a P, just put the numbers like 12 through 26. For all your journal articles, typically there's going to be either a DOI or a URL. Sometimes you have to play detective when you're on the website to try to find the DOI because it may not show up right on the website where you're looking, but typically you're able to open a PDF of the journal, and a lot of times the DOI is actually on the article pages. Otherwise, you can just click on your browser's URL that's associated with that article and put it into your reference. But again, most of your journal articles, especially the evidence-based ones, are going to have a DOI. Remember, there's no period after a DOI or a URL. If you don't know what the page numbers are, and sometimes that happens where there's no page numbers, leave that area blank. So don't write no page or NP. Don't write that. Just leave it blank. Put the volume, the issue number, if there's an issue number, and then your DOI or URL. One caveat on using URLs, I know a lot of people use, which is great, their school's library for finding their different sources of information. And then they'll copy the URL that appears associated with that specific school's library and put it as the link. Now that's fine and good because it works for you because you have the ability to get into that library and go right to that article. But if you have somebody who's reading your paper or your dissertation or project paper, and they want to do some follow-up and look up that article, and they click on the link that was specific to, let's say, Aspen University through EBSCO or ProQuest, in probably 99.9% of the time, when they click on that link, they're gonna be taken to a login page, and they have to if they don't have permission to log into that particular university, they're not gonna be able to access the paper. And even if they can log in, it won't take them directly necessarily to that article, and they'll still have to try to look it up. So help the reader out and put as much specific information as possible that takes them right to the source of the information. Here's an example of a website that can be pretty confusing to try to figure out, what do I put for reference? So, looking at it, it's pretty obvious, I think, the name of the article, so that's good. Underneath that, we have the name of the author, and so when we go to start writing the information down for the reference, it's always the last name, first initial, so it would be Banerjee, comma, D period, so we got that. Looking up a little bit, it says what year it was published, and it also gives us the month of publication. So in our reference, we would have in parentheses 2020, comma, June. Now, if you are going to put the month of publication in your reference, make sure you spell it out. Don't use abbreviations for the month. If it gave us an actual date of publication, you could actually put the date. Here they abbreviate the name of the article. So what you can do is actually you can hover over this web link, and because we're not live, nope, I've got to go back. Because we're not live on this site, it's just a picture. But if I hovered over it, it would actually pop up with what the name of the journal is, because as you can see, it's abbreviated. And we never want to abbreviate a journal because we don't want to assume that everybody knows what those abbreviations mean. So we would have to write that out as the Asian Journal of Psychiatry. 51 in this case here is the volume number. And then you have this number, which is 102154, which is probably the article number. And the best way to figure that out is to actually click on the PDF over here and open it up and look to see if it is indeed the article number. They may actually have page numbers that you can use instead. Some people I've seen miss out that this is the name of the journal, and they go up here and see PMC PubMed Central, and they list that as the name of the journal, and that's not correct. or they might see Elsevier Public Health Emergency Collection. Again, that's not the name of the journal. The name of the journal is down here. So you do need to pay attention to what is on this page. Now, the other issue is you have the ability to click on Cite, and it will say, here's how to cite this article, and it'll give you options for APA, MLA, Chicago, all these different types of formatting. And that's well and good. However, I would say probably in 95, so I don't know what the statistics are, very high statistic, it's probably not written in 7th edition APA. Even if it says it, it's probably not correct. So you could take that information, but and use it, but you're going to need to make sure you put it in the correct 7th edition format. Not everybody is as good with putting things into APA format as we would hope. And so, it's just something you'll have to go back and double check when you proofread. So here's an article to figure out. Let's see if it'll take me to it. I'm going to ask you to put in the chat box what you think about this. What is right or what is wrong with the way this APA is formatted? Can we use this in our references, or does something need to be fixed? So here's when I clicked on the little cite box, this is what came up for how to cite. And what is wrong with this APA citation? Is this something you're going to copy and paste and put it right into your reference list, or does it need to be fixed?
Let's see, we have that the journal is not in the title. I think they mean
Okay.
title case. The quotation marks,
Mm-hmm.
we have not indented properly.
Right.
What is 102154? Is there a dash missing?
No, that's the article number. If we look at the PDF of it, let me see if I can pull it up real quick. On the PDF, it actually says the issue number is 2020. So again, it gives you more information. So here's the article when I pull up the PDF, and as you can see at the top, you've got the volume number, which is 51, then it says 2020, which is the issue, and then 102,154 is the article number. And if you scroll down, there's really no page numbers on here. Oh, there's a page 2. So you could write 1 through 2 for page numbers, but also buried in the bottom here is the DOI. So if there was not a DOI on the front page, you could copy this and put it right into your reference. All right. So if you notice here on the front page, it doesn't say the issue number. We had to get that from looking at the page. Going back to the citation, we could add in the issue number. The other mistake, did anybody pick up? There's one other mistake that I can see right off the top.
Would we use the apostrophe?
It's interesting. I would not personally put those quotation marks because those are single quotation marks. And if you look in the APA manual, there's some grammar tips there, and they give examples of when it's appropriate to use double quotation marks and single quotation marks. And typically you have single quotation marks only when it's inside a quote. So if you were quoting somebody and then within that quote, you wanted to quote an additional something else, that's when you use the single quotation marks. So I would not put that single quotation mark in there because we're not really quoting anything. The mistake that I'm seeing that no one's brought up yet that I know of is there's no comma after the last name of the author before their first initial.
Oh, Dr. Novak, someone had just posted that right before you.
Oh, good. Good. As you can see, even though it says APA format, it's not really correct. I hate to say this, but you can't trust everything you see on the internet. Now, one of the things I also find that some students do is they'll put the information from an abstract and it doesn't take you to the full journal article. So, not that that's wrong, but again, if you can give the exact DOI, that really helps with bringing the person to the article. Sometimes what happens too is those articles have to either have a subscription to them or you have to purchase them in order to read the article. So that's where things kind of get dicey sometimes, but that doesn't mean you can't use it. And that doesn't mean you can't use the information from an abstract. But just recognize that there are going to be times where you have to try to see if there's a workaround to get the reader the exact link to the article. Be careful about how you format the DOI. Make sure it's in the 7th edition format, which can be found on page 299 in your APA manual. There's certain pages I have memorized because it comes up all the time. And this is now the appropriate way to do it. In the old edition, and what you'll see on the website a lot is it'll just say DOI colon and the numbers. And that was great for 6th edition, but that's not what the 7th edition requires. You have the option of hyperlinking the DOI or just typing it out. What tends to happen automatically if you're using like Microsoft Word, if you're set up that way, again, you'd have to go into your settings, but in most cases, it'll automatically hyperlink it for you. And that's okay. If you're on the website and you don't you want to copy and paste that DOI, if you right click on the DOI and then click on copy link address, it will automatically put the HTTPS information in front of the DOI number. So you don't have to go and try to recreate that. So I found that helps out quite a bit.
Dr. Novak, before you move away from this slide, we have a question. Why is the June written in?
Because again, you want to give the reader as much information on how they can locate the article. So we're putting June because that was the actual date it was published. If you had to go to a librarian because you didn't have internet access and you wanted them to pull the article so you could have a hard copy of it, giving the librarian as much information as where to find it, they can then go directly to the June publication and be able to find it, as opposed to having to look through all 12 months of that publication. This is not everything you need to know. There's a lot of other ins and outs, but it's just the basics of formatting citations and references. If you can get this under your belt, it's going to make your life so much easier as you go through trying to write your papers. Because I would say the majority of the references you're going to be using are a book, journal, or a website. Again, you look at the back and side cover of your APA manual. It will give you quick looks and examples of how to cite multiple types of references. Please note that if you're going to a dictionary or an encyclopedia, or if you're referencing a newspaper or a television website, it's a little bit different format for a website reference compared to what we talked about for the traditional website. So there are some changes within website formatting. That's why it's really important to review that back and side cover as well as looking at the page numbers. Pretty much page 351 and 352 go over all of that. And again, I have that memorized because it keeps coming up all the time. I'm going to end the slide share and open up a screen. So if somebody has a question about how to format something, I can actually type it right onto the screen.
Thank you so much for this informative presentation, Dr. Novak. And I just want to reinforce what you said about learning some of these basics will really, really be helpful. It is an investment of your time to learn this skill. It is. We're not expecting anyone to be perfect. But like Dr. Novak said, if you just get some of these basic skills under your belt, what will happen is your faculty can really concentrate on content and spend their time giving you their feedback there versus APA. And when you get to your dissertation or your doctoral project stage, the name of the game is to reduce the number of revisions you need to do. So if your faculty isn't having to spend time with you on APA, then they can focus on the content and you can focus on revising that. There is a question here about abbreviating the volume with journal articles. Do you capitalize volume? Do you actually write in VOL?
Absolutely not. So if we were writing something, it might be Smith, comma. So there's the author's last name, author's first initial. Let's say he has a second initial, so JR. And notice there's a space between the J and the R. APA says you have to do that. Then you're going to put in the year, period. The name of the journal article could be The Art of Writing in a Scholarly Manner. That sounds professional. Period. Okay, sentence case. There's no proper nouns here. But if I put in the United States, then that's a proper noun. So I put that in title case. Then I'm going to put the name of the journal in italics, the Journal of Scholarly Writing. Sounds good. Comma. The volume number could be 18. It's in italics. Take yourself out of italics and put the issue number. And you note that there is no space between the volume number or the issue. So you're not using any text to identify what the volume or the issue is. It is understood in the APA formula world that the volume number is always going to come after the name of the journal in italics. The issue number will always be in regular font. Then if there's page numbers known, a comma. I've seen it where online it'll have a colon, which was the old way of doing it. So you have to go back in and remove that colon and put a comma. Put the page numbers 29 through 34. Sounds good. Period. And then if I know my DOI, it's probably always going to be HTTPS and then doi.org 10 dot something dot JSW dot and then some other numbers. And there it is. Now, of course, in this case, we would have it indented. The United States would be indented. And my cursor is not showing up for some reason on here. We would indent that. And then this DOI would be indented as well. 1/2 inch. There we go. Backspace a little bit.
We have a question. Is there a space between the comma after the journal and the volume number? It says the Journal of Scholarly Writing, comma 18. Between the comma and the 18, is there a space?
There was a space. For some reason, it didn't show up. I didn't spell scholarly wrong. Right. Anybody pick up on that?
We have a request for clarification. If there's a proper noun in the title in a reference, is it capitalized?
Yes, proper nouns are capitalized. Same thing with if you have an abbreviation, like if you have Flintstone, Fred, 2019, HIV, AIDS. You want to make sure it's written that way as opposed to putting HIV, AIDS. So when you have abbreviations, you're going to have them in title case as well. The other thing is if you have a number that starts the title of an article or a book, you're always going to spell it out. So even though the article or the book may start with an actual numeral, APA says you must spell out the number. Covey S. I don't know what year it was, but let's just pretend it was 2018. He wrote the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I think that was the title. And so if you look at the actual book, it does have the number 7. But for reference purposes, this is a book, so it'll be written in italics. It would be 7 habits of highly effective people. So APA says whenever a number starts a sentence or the title of a book or an article, you always spell out the number.
We have a couple of more questions here in the chat box, and I just want to invite you, if you had a question that wasn't answered, either through the presentation or through people chatting, please, please, please let us get it answered now and retype it in the chat box. One of the questions is, do you double space the references?
Yes, everything is always double spaced. I don't have it set up this way because it's just my worksheet, but everything should be double spaced. Now, here's a little tip. You may have to go into your Word program and adjust your settings to have it remove space after paragraph. Because what I find happens is people are doing a great job double spacing between everything. And then they start a new paragraph. And all of a sudden it becomes a triple space. And that's because the way the program is automatically set up for some reason inside Word. So you have to go back and remove that extra space. Now, a quick way to double space all of this, let's see if I can get it to work, is you can highlight it, go up here to, I can't see it because I've got my little toolbar. Here we go. You see this little icon here with the up and down arrows? If you click on that, it gives me my line spacing options and I can immediately put it into double spacing. So that would be the correct format in terms of what the double spacing. Then when I start my next reference, I'm double spacing also between this last line and the next line. You don't have to triple space. So if I want to make sure this is double spaced, I can go back up here, click on double space. So that would be the proper way. But I found that this happens and it's no fault of the student because they don't realize that their template is off. And that's what we found with Perla was doing that as well. So again, you need to go into your settings and make sure you're set up with your correct margins and your correct indentation, where it should be indented a half an inch when you start a new paragraph. Other things that people get confused about are headings, and that's another whole presentation. In most cases, you can look again at the quick look for headings is on the inside front cover of your AP manual. There's a couple of great videos on YouTube on how to create correct headings in APA 7th edition. One thing to remember with all headings is no matter what the heading is, it's always going to be in bold font and title case. And then it just depends on where it's located on the page. But I'm digressing. So back.
Well, it sounds like it's really important. I hope everyone on the call or listening to the recording has their APA manual and you're looking in those covers. A couple more questions here before we log off. I know we're running a little late, but people just are so excited to have you here answering their questions. If we look at this reference that you have right here, is the comma after the journal in italics? So that comma after the G in writing.
Yep. For those of you who don't know shortcuts, if you want to put something in italics or regular font, all you have to do is a Control I. If I were to do Control I, I'm now going to start typing in italics. If I wanted to change this, if I can get this to highlight, which there we go. Whoops. If I can highlight this and I want to put it back into regular font, I just would do another Control I and it changes it back to regular font. So that's a little shortcut. Your Control I will take you into italics or take you out of italics if you've already got it.
That's a great tip. We've got a question here about percentages, and I know percentages and numbers in APA can get really tricky. So the question is, what about percentage in a number below 10, do we spell out the number? And I had asked for clarification, meaning are we talking about in the text where we're saying researchers have found 3% versus how it would be in the reference if it was in a title? And they said both. They're curious to know how to do both situations.
Yeah, if you go to page 187 in your APA manual, the book actually has a whole bunch of information about how and when to use numbers and everything. And in terms of percentages, it says to use the percent symbol and when it's accompanied by a numeral. So you would do 3%. You would not have to write out the number 3 because in this case you're giving an actual quantity. Otherwise, if you were just using the number without the percentage sign and it was less than 10, typically you would spell it out, except if you're looking at measurements, like if you were going to give 5 milligrams of something, it would be the number 5 and then mgs. So there's all these exceptions to the rule for when you use a number and when you spell it out. And again, you're going to be looking at your APA manual to figure that out. Which brings me to something that has nothing to do with references or citations, but since we're talking about numbers, let's say you're doing a list and you want to talk about all the different options you have or advantages of using solar power. And you're writing your sentences and you want to list them all in the sentence. You don't use numbers. You would put something like the advantages of using solar power include, and you use the letters of the alphabet. A, decreased costs, comma, or colon. Either one is okay. B would be blah, 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 comma. And then if the last one is my last entry for my advantages, I'd put and C, comma, blah, blah. When you're going to use numbers, actual numbers to make a list would be the advantages of using solar power include 1, decreased costs, decreased costs. And if it's not a full sentence, you don't put a period. That's an APA thing. Then it would be number 2, clean environment, 3, happy people. I don't know, I'm just making this up. If you're making a list and you're going like that, you can use bullets or numbers. But if you're putting it into the sentence, you use letters of the alphabet. And again, all this is in your APA manual. You just have to spend the time going through it. What I've done in my APA manual is I have taken little Post-it notes and I have tabbed certain paper pages and put what I'm tabbing, like it'll say how to notate a copyright reference or a copyright citation, because that's something that comes up and I can never remember what page it's on. So I have my APA manual tab with my little notes, and it makes it easier for me to find that information.
And this will be the last question for tonight's webinar. And it is there a space between the parentheses and the word? So before you delete that, Dr. Novak, where you have an A parentheses decreased cost.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm just typing fast.
Typing fast to get the example there. What this is a great example. I see this a lot as well. And again, so many comments in the chat box thanking you for such informative information. I just want to thank all of you for taking time out of your day to refine your APA skills. It will help you become a better scholarly writer. It's a great investment to get these basic tips and techniques down. I want to remind you that on Wednesday, July 20th, that will be our next webinar. Dr. Michelle Whitman will be presenting how to read research articles, but she's going to go beyond just reading the articles. She's going to get into organizing. And I know we had some questions in the chat box about that tonight, but also note taking and things of that nature. We've got a couple questions in the chat I do want to address about the registration. The link that you used to register for this webinar tonight will get you to all the webinars for 2022 unless we break the system and we get so many people logging in and we need to move to a different platform. So if you've registered once and you're here tonight, it's going to be that same link. Someone asked about signing up for a listserv. These videos are on the Aspen University YouTube channel. So I encourage you guys to become subscribers, and that will be the fastest way because marketing will actually post this video before I have a chance to email it to you. So if you subscribe to the Aspen University YouTube channel and you hit the alerts, you will be alerted when one of these webinars or other webinars that we're doing that you might find helpful are loaded to that channel. So thank you again, Dr. Novak, and thank you everyone for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us this evening. And I look forward to seeing you next month.